Here I am, laying down, surrendering all. Pressing on, pressing in, my beloved has called. Well, I've made it this far, through the fire somehow, relentlessly jealous in pursuit of you now. There's no turning back. I remember you said, come to me. I'll reach out my hands, I'll seek out your face, and here I'll find heaven on earth. Here I'll find grace. Here I am, make me over, I won't stay the same. Here you are, your wonderful beauty unchanged. Well, I've made it this far, and through the fire somehow, relentlessly jealous in pursuit of you now. There's no turning back. I remember you said, come to me. I'll reach out my hands, I'll seek out your face, and here I'll find heaven on earth. Here I'll find grace. I'll lift up my voice, I'll call on your name, and here I'll find heaven on earth. Here I'll find grace. You see all of me, yet you still believe that one day I'll be like you. You see all of me, yet you still believe that one day I'll be like you. You see all of me, yet you still believe that one day I'll be like you. You see all of me, yet you still believe that one day I'll be like you. I'll be like you. I'll reach out my hands, I'll seek out your face, and here I'll find heaven on earth. Here I'll find grace. I lift up my voice, I'll call on your name, and here I'll find heaven on earth. Here I'll find grace, and you won't find heaven on until you find grace. Did you see me in the valley? Did you hear me call your name? You whisper, do not be afraid, for help is on the way. So I'll wait here, I'll wait on you. Did you see me when I'd fallen? Did you ever look away? While my world falls apart, I'm giving you my heart. Blinded eyes see, they can see so clearly that God, you're all I need. You're everything to me now. I'm falling more in love with you. Oh, yeah. With you. See you in the valley. Somebody needed to hear that today. He can hear you call his name. He whispers, do not be afraid, for help is on the way. So I'll wait on you, I'll wait on you, 'cause God, you're all I need. Somebody tell him, you're everything to me now. I'm falling more in love with you. Oh, yeah. and we sing hallelujah. Oh, yeah. I'm falling more in love with you. Oh, yeah. And none compared to you, oh, yeah. And we sing hallelujah. Oh, I'm falling more in love with you. Oh, yeah. Ooh, and God, you're all I need. You're everything to me now. I'm falling more in love with you. Oh, yeah. With you, He's already begun his work. So my name is Richard Andrew. I was born in San Gabriel and I was raised in West Covina. Middle class home, 2 hardworking parents. We weren't wealthy, but all of our needs were met. Parents made good decisions. I was raised in the Catholic Church, so I was baptized, made my first Holy Communion, my confirmation. At the age of 12, my parents bought me a bass guitar and a bass amp. It was a Fender Bullet bass and a PV bass amp. Some of my other friends in the neighborhood, they got instruments too, drum set, electric guitar. Of course, we did what all kids that age do. We put together a band. And we all learned Detroit Rock City from Kiss, and we were ready. My older sister was dating an older guy who was a guitar player in a local punk rock band. They played a lot of local clubs and a lot of backyard parties. And one booking, their bass player wasn't available, so he said, "Hey, maybe your little brother can sit in." My folks said they gave a green light, so I went ahead and did it. And I played bass at a backyard party. The kegs were flowing, and there was mosh pit in the backyard. Eventually, the party got broken up by the cops hovering right over the backyard with a helicopter, shining the light down into the yard. Some of you been there. Don't look all sideways at me. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I I remember coming home that night. It was well after 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was really nervous because I had never stayed out that late before, ever. And I got to the house, and all the lights were off, and I finagled my way with my key to get in the house and make it down the hall to my bedroom, and I quietly shut the bedroom door as quietly as I could, and I flipped the light on, and it was like, yes, I made it. I thought I was good to go. I had my whole story planned out for what I would tell my dad the next day. Basically telling him I got home a whole lot earlier than I did. So the next day came, and it was Saturday, and we were doing our chores, and everything was pretty normal, and I thought for sure, I was going to totally skate through this. And out of nowhere, my dad told me, hey, those guys are, too old, and you got home late, and, it's probably not going to be cool for you to do that again. And man, I was devastated. As a young person, I was certain I was right, and he was all kinds of wrong. And I was so devastated that within a week of him making that announcement, I packed up everything I thought was important, and I ran away from home at 14, and I didn't go back. So between the time I ran away from home at 14 and my 18th birthday, I wore a lot of hats. Obviously, I was a runaway. Eventually, I was a high school dropout. I was a teen father expecting my second child before I was 18. Convicted felon, drug dealer, drug addict, and I was homeless. I remember at the age of 18, I would walk through neighborhoods looking for homes that had the motorhomes parked alongside the house, where they pour that extra slab of concrete and they pull the motorhome alongside the house. I would look for those houses so that I could break into them and have a place to get out of the cold and sleep at night. And of course, eventually I started getting arrested, 30 days here, 60 days, 90 days, L.A. County Jail, Riverside, San Bernardino. Eventually, I got sentenced to 1 year, and they sent me off to Wayside. It's like this old army barracks out there by Magic Mountain. L.A. County Jail uses it for folks that they send out for, I guess, a year or more. But anyway, I got sent out there for a year. I don't even know if they still use it. This was a long time ago. He said, yeah, they're still using it. Oh, that's good. So the judge told me, if I see you again, I'm going to send you to prison. But I was a dope fiend. I was a drug addict. That stuff had complete control over me. There was no threat that could detour me or change my mind. So, sure enough, that judge saw me again. And she kept her word, and she sent me to state prison for 4 years. Did I say that I came here to talk to somebody? I'm sorry if I didn't say that. God sent me here to speak to someone. By now, you may already know that it's you. You can act like you don't and like it's not you, but you already know it's you. So I was off to start my prison sentence on a bus that was driving us all to the prison. Now, L.A. County back then, man, that was a pretty ugly, dirty, scary place. So I figured, man, if I could survive there, I pretty much could survive anywhere. But, man, state prison still had like an extra little something on it. I seen enough movies. I was like, man, what did I get myself into this time? And as the bus pulled onto the prison yard, this was back when they had
free weights, so you could actually lift weights out in the yard. They don't do that anymore. I guess too many people throwing them at each other or hitting each other in the head with them. I don't know. But anyway, the bus pulled onto the yard and drove by the weight pile, and it seemed like it was slow motion, like everyone on the weight pile just turned and glared at the bus. And I remember thinking, oh man, I'm in trouble. What have I done? But as luck would have it, I happened to fit right in. And I settled in and started doing my program and doing my time. Waiting for my release date so I could get out and get loaded and get laid and get high and get stupid and all those things. No intention whatsoever of changing. Five days a week they have mail call where another inmate walks in with a stack of mail and they read the inmate numbers or the last names, and everybody comes and gets their little cards or whatever they're getting. And it may go without saying, but every day at mail call they never called my name because I had burned every bridge, taken advantage of every relationship. Even when I was back in my parents' lives, you know, seeing them for holidays and stuff, I'd be loaded and pulling money out of mom's purse and all that silly stuff. I did it all. Abusing those relationships, stealing from them, lying to them, manipulating them, all those things. So anyway, here I am in prison and they're mail call and they're not calling my name. Should have come as no surprise, I guess. My cellmate, on the other hand, his girlfriend would write him every day. She put lipstick on and kissed the envelope, spray perfume on the paper and slip it in. So when he pulls it out of the envelope, this fragrance like fills the room. And man, I hated that guy. I'm not bitter. So one day, to my surprise, my name was called. And, I tried to be real nonchalant and real cool and just walk up real slow to get the envelope, like this is no big deal at all. Inside, I wanted to run and grab that envelope, but I just acted like, this is like, I've got nothing better to do. I guess I'll go and get this envelope. So I grabbed it, and immediately I looked down at it, and it was my name, my CDC number, and I looked at the return address, and I didn't recognize the person or the city or anything. But man, I didn't care. It was my name on it, and it sure felt good to hear my name called at mail call. Something about that just felt so good. I've shared my story with a lot of people in the military, and they've all come to me and said afterwards, you know what, it feels good when we hear our name called at mail call too. So we get it. Anyway, I went back to my bunk and sat down and opened it up and pulled it out, and it was like a Hallmark card, like a greeting card. I tell people it's like a Christianese Hallmark card because it was like, all hallmarked out, but then every word in there was like God and love and Jesus and like, all religious. And I was like, well, like none of this means anything to me. And I put it back in the envelope, but man, it still felt good to hear my name called at mail call. It could have been another language. It could have been, completely telling me off. It could have been anything in that card. It still felt good. So to my surprise, those cards kept coming twice a month, every month for over 2 years. Every one of them talking about God and Jesus and love and whatever. None of them ever having like this big revelation where this light shining in this cell or angels' wings. Nothing happened like that. No supernatural encounter. I still could care less about the contents of every card, but it still felt good to hear my name called at mail call. So fast forward closer to my release date, I receive word that I'm being moved to another area of the prison. And that's fairly odd. If you're not getting in any trouble and you're close to your release date, they tend to leave you alone. So it was odd that I was being moved. And I remember not being happy about it, but I did it. And the first time I saw my new cellmate, he was coming in from the shower, and he had a towel wrapped around his waist and a towel wrapped around his back. And when he pulled the towel off his back, I saw 3 words tattooed across his back, the only tattoo he had. And the 3 words were, Jesus is Lord. And I remember I looked at the tattoo and thought, oh, cool, it's just a lame, weak Christian. He's not going to give me any trouble. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I did come here to tell the truth. And that's what I thought. I thought those guys running around with the Bible, those Bible thumpers, they're just hiding behind the Word of God. They were weak. That's what I thought. And here was one of them in my cell, one of those weak Bible thumpers. But to me, all I thought is, man, this is actually kind of cool because I'm so close to my release date. I'm not going to get into any kind of trouble. I'm good to go. I'm almost home. I could taste my freedom. Every night at the same time, this guy would get dressed and, put on his pants and his boots and his shirt and his jacket and make his way out. I tell people that you could have set your watch by him. He was just right on time every day. I could care less where he was going, by the way. We didn't speak, but on this one particular night, as he went for the door, he turned around, and to my surprise, he asked me, do you want to go with me? And I was shocked. I mean, if we weren't in a room the size of a broom closet, I might have thought that maybe he was talking to somebody else. And before I know it, I asked him, immediately, I just responded, where do you go every night? And he said, I go to the chapel. Now, at this point, I'm spending over 20 hours a day on my rack, on my bunk. I'm so close to my release date. I don't want to get in any trouble. I'm getting up to eat, take a shower, maybe in the TV room for a minute. But other than that, 20 plus hours a day, I'm on this bunk bed. So I hear somebody basically saying to me, do you want to get off the bunk bed? That's how it translated to me in my mind. And I thought, the chapel, how much trouble can somebody get in at the chapel? I mean, they're singing Kumbaya and stuff over there, right? So I'm like, you know what? Yes, I'm going with you. And I got dressed and I went with him. And we walked in and I sat in the back trying to hide. I don't want anybody to see me in there in the chapel. I'm hiding in the back and they got somebody in there. He's a guest from the outside. I remember he had a guitar and he sang songs and he was sharing. I don't know what he sang about or what he talked about. But at the end, he said, all right, I want everyone to bow your heads and close your eyes. And in the back of the room, I can see the back of everyone's heads, and they're bowing their heads, until finally it's just me and the speaker. He's looking at me, I'm looking at him. It was real awkward. I'm like, oh man, this is really weird. And he's looking at me almost as if to say, I'm not going to keep going until you close your eye and bow your head. And I'm like, this is so weird. So I close my eyes and I put my head down. And when you go to sleep at night and you turn the lights out and you put your head on your pillow and you close your eyes for the first time, you can still kind of see images back there in I don't know if it's your mind's eye. It's behind your eyelids. It's sometimes they're flashes of light or whatever. Am I the only freak in this building or what? You guys are looking at me that dude needs to go. We need to take this guy to the emergency room. He's he's seeing stuff but when his eyes are closed. Anyway, and you usually don't have any control over it. I tell people, it's hot fudge sundaes, fire trucks, soccer ball. You're where did this even come from? Where did I even see a hot fudge sundae today? But anyway, so we're in the chapel and I close my eyes and I bow my heads. And immediately, as soon as I bow my head, I see 2 things alternating back and forth, 2 images in my mind's eye. And the two pictures are my two daughters. First I see my oldest daughter, then my youngest daughter, then the oldest, then the youngest, and they're alternating back and forth. And then after what seemed like forever, someone taps me on the shoulder and I open my eyes. Right when I open my eyes, it's in that moment that I come to realize that I was crying. Like eyes all, soaking with tears down my face, snot running down the whole 9 yards. It was ugly. And I look up to see who tapped me on the shoulder, and it's my cellmate. And he's like right in my face. Like when I open my eye, he's like right there. And he's like, "Hey, man, you want to go up?" What? See, I don't know what freaky Jesus stuff they do in there. I don't know if it was time for us to like dance with snakes or what. I didn't know what we were going to do, right? He's like, "Are you ready to go up?" I'm like, what does that mean? Like hot air balloon rides in the back? I don't know what it means, right? So I think about it for a split second, and I have no idea what go up means, but I knew one thing. The answer was yes, and I said yes. And I made my way forward in that prison chapel in front of all my peers, and I got right in the front, and I prayed a prayer to receive Jesus as my Lord and my Savior in that prison chapel. And that night when I got back to my cell and got back to my rack and it was lights out and I was laying there, had my head on the pillow, and all I could think of is, were you just crying in front of everyone? You idiot. I wish I could tell you I was thinking about angels and Jesus and stuff, but no. All I was thinking about is, what an idiot. Did you really just cry in front of everyone? How are you going to show your face tomorrow? And I dozed off and I fell asleep. The next morning I woke up, and the first thought I had when I woke up were the letters I got. Twice a month, every month for over 2 years. I remember one of them had a telephone number in it. And I saved every one, and I dug through them, and I found the one with the phone number, and I signed up for phone time. 15 minutes. Back then, you used to actually step into a phone booth. They had phone booths on the prison yard. Today, my kids don't even know what a phone booth is. They're like, phone booth? What's that? Anyway, so I signed up for my phone time, and when it came, I got in the phone booth, and I shut the door, and I dialed all the numbers, and I waited while the recording tells the person you're calling, "Hey, you're getting a phone call right now from a really bad person." Some of you got those calls. Some of you made those calls. Anyway. So it's like press 5 if you want to accept the charges, press 8 if you want the phone booth they're standing in to explode. So I waited and I held the receiver to my ear, and out of the quiet on the other end of the phone, I heard a little old lady's voice say, "Hello." I said, "Hello?" She said, "Who is this?" And immediately I thought, you just heard the recording. You know who this is. Come to find out later, she was writing inmates all over the country. She had no idea which one of us was calling that day. So I told her my name, and before I could finish, enunciating my name, she cut me off and she said, "Have you given your life to Jesus yet?" I said, "I did some funky Jesus thing last night. I was crying. It was weird." She cut me off again and she said, "Good. Now it's time for you to pray in tongues. Here we go." And then she pretty much proceeded to scare the crap out of me. She would come up for air, and tell me to jump in when you're ready. And then she just, and I was like, oh my God. And there's other inmates like standing just out to the phone booth, like in line for their time, their phone time. And I'm like, oh my God, if you could hear what I'm listening to right now, this is like wacky, freaky, scary, all that stuff, right? So the recording came in and said, you have 60 seconds or whatever, like left on the call. She barreled right past that and went all the way to the end. And her voice cut off. And I put the phone on the receiver and I got out of the phone booth and walked away, and I thought to myself, don't ever call that number again. Ever. Like, lose that number stat. So I ended up getting released from that prison on January 8th of 1994. It was a condition of my parole to be in his 12-step group, and I found one at a local church. My parents, even after everything I had done to abuse and neglect and manipulate and take advantage of that relationship, they still let me parole to their home. And I got plugged into a local church for my 12-step group, and before I knew it, I was there Sunday morning, Sunday night. I was there for men's fellowship, for singles, for midweek Bible study. I could not get enough of him. Seeking his face and having him allow himself to be found every day. Every day I went seeking him, he would let me find him. Every time I opened his word looking for more of him, he would give me more. Every time I prayed wanting to have communion with him, he would actually talk back and we would have a conversation. And all this crazy starts happening in my life as he begins to strip away the old and reveal something new. All I knew was being a dope fiend, a drug addict, a deadbeat dad, a convict. These are certain things that's all I knew how to be. So he literally had to make me over again. He had to reteach me how to live as this new person. And he did. And I started serving in the church. I'd volunteer. I'd scrub the toilets. I'd do anything I could to just be a part of what God was doing there. And they said, well, what do you know how to do? And I said, well, I know like 3 chords on the guitar. And they said, awesome, that's every worship song known to man. You're in. So I would play the guitar at this in-home Bible study. Just a handful of people, these women would come and sing, and I'd play. And I remember I showed up at the Bible study one night, and the pastor was there, and he told me, sisters so-and-so and such aren't going to make it tonight. I said, okay, cool. So we're just going to bypass the worship then and go right to the study. And he said, well. I said, well, what? And he said, well, I was hoping that maybe you would sing. I said, no, I don't sing. I'm the guitar player. And then he did that thing. I'm pretty sure they teach him this in seminary, where he said, well, I guess Jesus won't get any worship tonight. Who does that? That's just mean. So, since I was in this corner, I'll never forget it. I sang, Lord, I lift your name on high, in a living room with a handful of people. First time in my life I ever sang, and I haven't stopped singing since. And I could not get enough of worship. I could not get enough. And eventually I was playing in Bible studies and playing in men's meetings, anywhere that they were going to get together and they didn't have worship, I would show up with my guitar to sing. Eventually, I started being able to sing or play on the worship team and sing a little bit and just kind of like climbing up through these ranks, right? And eventually, I started to write my own songs, and one day the pastor heard one of the songs and he's like, wow. He said, I want you to sing that song. I'm going to a church and I'm going to be a speaker, and I want you to sing that song before I speak. I want that in the hearts of the people before they hear my message. So I did it, and that became the norm. Every time he'd go speak somewhere as a guest, I would follow along and I'd sing a song and he'd share. So about 2.5 years after my release date, he and I were at a church. I didn't know anybody there but him. He didn't know anybody there but the people who invited him from the staff. I sang one of my songs. He brought forth the word. I packed up everything. People were filtering out of the building, shaking his hand, thanking him as the guest. I was just waiting. And as I sat in the back of this room, there was a group of people kind of having a conversation. And I couldn't really make out what they were saying, and I wasn't eavesdropping or anything, but one word would come out of their little conversation. It was clear as day. So the rest of it's like Charlie Brown's teacher. I can't make out anything that's being said. And then one word would just rise above their conversation, and that word was rose. And then it would go back to like a bunch of gibberish, and then one word, rose. This happened 3 or 4 times, and finally it was just such a weird thing that I got up and I approached the group. And the person closest to me said, "Oh, you have such a beautiful voice." I said, "Thank you so much." And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And she said, "Sure." I said, "I was overhearing your conversation. Is your name Rose?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Rose, what's your last name?" And she said, "Gunn. My name is Rose Gunn." And immediately I flashed back to the return address on each of those envelopes I got in prison twice a month, every month for over 2 years, signed inside, "Love Rose." The return address, Rose Gunn. I said, "Rose, you are not going to believe who I am." And I told her, and it was like she lost control of her body physically. She just slipped out of the chair all the way down to the ground, praising God until she was face down on the ground, praising Him. She had just heard the guy from that phone call lead a room full of people in worship. That had to blow her mind. We ended up staying in touch. We were kind of geographically challenged, but we stayed in touch. And years later, the night before she went home to be with Jesus, I was standing at her bedside in a nursing home, praying with her. She didn't have any family that came to be with her, and I knew in that moment that all that happened with her letters and everything, I thought that it was about me, but God quickly revealed that it was always about Rose, His good and faithful servant. And when she passed from death to life, He did not want her to be alone. So He orchestrated all of that stuff so I would be at her bedside. The legacy of Rose Gunn continues. I've told this story for over 20 years. And literally, we've seen thousands of people come to Jesus because of hearing a little story about a little old lady named Rose. She didn't have a lot to give, but she kind of liked writing little handwritten notes, so that became her ministry. And after sending out hundreds and hundreds of cards over the years, one of those people, one of those inmates, walked up to her into a church and said, "Is your name Rose?" That's how the God of the universe works. As if it wasn't enough that He had delivered me from drugs and alcohol, that He had remade all of my relationships. Folks, if you would see My family at Christmas time, just a few days ago, if you were like a fly on the wall watching, you would never guess in a million years what I've put them through. God has completely restored and remade all of those things. Do you know that I sat in a courtroom? Obviously, I had lost physical and legal custody of both of my daughters, and rightfully so. Their mother was granted all those things. So a few years after my release date, actually closer to 5, I was in a courtroom because my oldest daughter said, "Dad, I want to come live with you." And I told my wife, they're not going to give me custody because of who I am, but I want her to see that I'm willing to go through the motions, though, so she could at least see that Dad tried to get me. So we went and we were in a courtroom, and their mother was on one side who did everything right and cared for them from birth. I'm on the other side of the room. I told you my resume. And the judge looks down, and he actually grants me 50% legal and 50% physical of my youngest daughter, and then he grants me 100% physical and 50% legal of my oldest daughter. And as I sat there thinking, is this judge on crack? You're definitely getting fired after this, dude. I'm just saying. Immediately, I thought of that infomercial. I am hardcore infomercial guy. Right? Like set it and forget it, blah, blah, blah. All those things, right? I'm like all into those, right? So anyway, there's one for CLR. You might have heard of it. Pretty cool product. You take something that's like 1,000 years old and you dip it in CLR and pull it out and it's like solid gold, brand new, right? Hey, this stuff works, man. Anyway, I liken CLR to the blood of Jesus. Because I sat there in that courtroom, and the only thing that made sense that day was that one drop of the blood of Jesus on my head immediately made the judge look at me and think, he is worthy, he is in right standing, he is a good father, he is everything we're looking for in a dad. That guy is it. What can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. You know that I didn't tell you guys the kind of dad I was. I used to get my youngest daughter when she was a baby, and I used to get those playpens that you push the floor down and the 4 walls pop up. When their mother would leave the apartment, I would open the front door and put the playpen outside the front door. I'd push the floor down and the 4 walls would pop up, and I'd stick my baby daughter out there, and then I would go in and get loaded. And in my mind, I actually thought I was doing her a favor by putting her outside while I got loaded. And some people ask, man, how long did you leave her out there? I have no idea. Even as I stand before you today, I have no idea how long I left that baby outside. But I know one thing. I know that last year I got to watch her walk onto a platform and get her bachelor's in art degree, graduating from college, magna cum laude, and I got to watch it happen. Only God, friends. Only God. Every head bowed, every eye closed, please. As we stand here on the verge of a new year, many of us are thinking there's some things that we don't want to take with us from 2014 into 2015. Some of us are thinking that there's some things we were seeking after, looking for, hoping to receive in 2014, and we're hoping that maybe we'll find those things and finally possess them in the new year. So that's two sides of a coin. On one, we don't want to take some junk with us. And on the other side of the coin, we're hoping that we'll find some things that we didn't find this year. Now, as I sang my songs and I shared my story, for some of you in the room, my words might have slipped under your chair or over your head or maybe to the left of you or the right of you.